Which Side Podcast is a proud member of the Which Side Media Collective.
This week's episode is brought to you by Vlatko Primorak. He wanted to give a short shout out, but I'm going to read you his whole message just because I love this guy, right? When it comes to a message, I wish I could summarize mine in one sentence instead of two. Point I wish to make is, I went vegan for ethical reasons, thinking I will be hungry and weak, and got rewarded with being able to run Ironman races way easier than ever before. Humble brag. Not that I'm good at them, nor do I wish to brag. Yeah, you do. I simply want to point out there is instant karma to being ethically vegan. Perhaps I could summarize it in a sentence after all. Becoming ethically vegan brought instant karma in form of easier, better, faster Ironman triathlons. That precious little reward pales in comparison to the feeling of freedom and joy of living a compassionate, mindful, honest life. I think he summarizes that pretty well. But he continues. A bit of cheating, that semicolon, but hey, it is one sentence after all. If you do a shout out, great. If not, fuck shit damn. I still love you guys. Keep up the good work. Well, you know what? Fuck shit damn to you. I love you too. Even if you are bragging a little bit. Makes me a little jealous. I'm vegan and I don't do any goddamn Ironmans.
You're not vegan enough.
I totally true. But if you guys want to sponsor an episode and do a shout out, all it costs is $10 or more if you're feeling generous. Donate that at whichsidepodcast.com and we'll say whatever the fuck you want us to say. This is episode 112.
Yeah, we talk to John and Atticus from the UNC Freedom Club.
It was a really interesting conversation. We talk about technology, primitivism, veganism, anarchism, and a couple other things too. So check that out. What news and events do we have going on this week?
What week is this?
It's the week of New Year's.
Noise demos. Go out to your local prison and make some noise. Make so much noise that the prisoners inside can hear. Also, check out New Year's Eve shutdown demonstrations wherever you can find them.
The final slingshot of 2014.
It's the final slingshot. Doo-doo-doo.
29th of December, 1890. 200 Sioux were killed by U.S. troops at Wounded Knee, otherwise known as the Wounded Knee Massacre. We gotta find some more uplifting ones.
Yeah, seriously, that's downer.
Man, we have 2 massacres in 2 weeks. God damn the U.S. What the fuck? But
cops are still killing Native Americans, and they're going unnoticed.
I wish I could say you were wrong. I really do wish that. But if you like these every week, we pulled these out of the Slingshot Personal Organizer. You can get your personal organizer, and right now is the best time to get it, to organize all of 2015 at any info shop. Well, most info shops. If you have a local info shop, go get one there. If not, you can get one at an online info shop, like AK Press. Yeah. And, you know, it's a really awesome collective. So go help them out. This is how they raise money for their collective. And it's the shit, man.
They don't pay us to sponsor them?
Nope, not a penny.
Because if they did, then I'd be like, yo, why'd you take out all the animal and earth liberation actions in the newest Slingshot?
I sincerely hope you guys enjoy this episode.
Which side are you on? Which side are you on? Which side are you on? Which side? Which side are you on? 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 Which side are you on?
How are you guys doing?
Good. How are you?
Doing really well.
I was doing a lot better 10 minutes ago.
That's good.
Cool. Well, I'm John Jacobi.
Hi, I'm Atticus.
And I'm Jordan.
Yeah, and I'm Jeremy, so you can kind of tell us apart, hopefully.
Yes.
Yeah.
So what have you guys been doing up to today?
I have woken up and been on the computer and reading, and that is it.
Yeah, that's essentially been my life too. You know,
Reading
hanging
anything?
out.
What are you guys
anything
reading?
Good? Yeah.
The Question Concerning Technology by Heidegger. I'm rereading Technological Society right now, and a book on modernity that's like written by a lot of different people.
Okay, modernity. Now you're making me feel inferior. I'm not familiar with that term.
Modernity is in like modern times. So like modern, yeah.
Okay.
So like modernization is the process of a traditional society becoming a technological society.
Okay. So this is like one area that I've never done a whole lot of research into, because when I get into basic primitivism, research really stopped with Zirzan, and I've never been a fan of old Zirzan. And I think it's been brought up a couple times on the show before, where I get kind of lost when it goes into the idea of art and time and language.
Right.
Yeah. So what are you reading that's different than this, my basic understanding of Zirzan?
I'm not a big fan of Zirzan's interpretation of primitivism either, and I'm kind of upset that he has such a monopoly over the name in North America. Not because he seems. I have friends who are friends with him, and they say he's a nice guy. I've interacted with him over email, I think once or twice, and he hasn't been. He's been great to interact with. I hope maybe to even bring him to the university to talk to him about some of his ideas. But I really think that maybe some of the other thinkers in the Fifth Estate had it right with their idea of primitivism, which is not this. Primitivism is not this this absolute ideology, but it's not about a return to the Pleistocene, but a reorientation to the more primitive sides of our lives. David Watson writes a lot about this, so he was very skeptical of Zirzan's critiques of agriculture and time, and thought that it was the wrong direction to push primitivism, and thought that we needed to focus more on what we can do as people living in an industrial age. Because no matter what, even if we do succeed with a return, even if that was possible, the scars of industry would still be here. We still lost species. We still have a huge healing process to go through. And so I'm not really a big fan of talking about returns. Just a lot more about reorientation.
What's your take on it, Atticus?
I actually haven't read any of Zirzan's readings or anything, but for the most part, I agree with John in that there is a sort of scar that is left after the fall of industrial society, and there needs to be a focus on how to maneuver around the effects of it.
You know, don't feel like you ever need to read Zirzan. Kind of don't. I'm giving you the okay just to say, fuck it, you don't need to.
Glad to have your approval.
One of my biggest fallings out that I personally have had with like the whole idea of quote unquote primitivism, I'm not a fan of that terminology personally, but like when I first started like really getting into the like learning about it and everything, I would have been 17 years ago or so, 16 years ago. And I had like some personal correspondence with Kevin Tucker and about how his diving into that ideology made him step away from veganism and animal rights. And that made me just kind of go like, yeah, I can't really get into that because I totally believe that, everything should be granted, equal consideration. What's your guys' personal view on that?
I have interacted with Kevin Tucker before, and while I would say that I could probably put up with, I like Zerzan from how I've interacted with him. I haven't really enjoyed any of my interactions with Kevin Tucker, so I don't really know much about what his views are, but he seems like he likes to troll people a lot of the time. So I take a lot of what he says with a grain of salt before I figure out whether or not what he's saying is genuine. But as far as veganism and animal rights goes, there's obviously been a lot of overlap between this whole ecology perspective and the animal rights perspective. In fact, Paul Watson talks about a time whenever he was drafted by Edward Abbey into Earth First and then given a subscription to the journal. And Paul Watson, he's really about the animal rights. That's kind of where he comes from, the perspective that he comes from. But he was a really big fan of Earth First's whole ecosystem approach, and eventually made the Sea Shepherd Society what did he call it? The naval branch of Earth First. So I think that there's definitely a lot of overlap there. As far as veganism goes, I'm personally not a big fan of vegan outreach, as in making it more than just a personal choice. But I think a lot of that comes from a misunderstanding. I'm actually trying to enter into a lot of dialogue with people who do it because I don't understand it. But dismissing it outright is certainly not the right way to go.
Well, perfect. What questions do you have?
I just I don't understand why it's anything more than a lifestyle choice, why it's anything more than just a personal choice on diet, and why people are putting energy into actually trying to make other people go vegan.
Jordan pointed at me like,
I'll let you take that
here
first.
You go. Well, let me first ask, why do you have the idea of wanting to get society away from an industrialized standpoint and going more towards a natural, wild standpoint, or whatever you'd want to refer to it as?
Maybe Atticus could explain a little bit more about our orientation toward wildness.
Well, our ideas is that wildness is something that is innately human. It's something ingrained in our beings, and industrial society is suppressing that in whatever way that it can. It's making us put on facades. It's curing our wildness with medicine or, addiction or material possessions. And it's essentially deviating us from something that's really human, and I guess really animalistic. And preserving wildness is preserving humanity.
Okay.
Essentially preserving freedom.
So let me take it from that standpoint from you. So to me, part of being vegan is giving the animals themselves that intrinsic animalistic value that you're saying. So right now in our industrial society, that how we do animal agriculture completely robs these animals of that freedom, of that wildness that you're speaking of. And it's really hard for someone to say, oh, well, I'm okay with, not being vegan and still consume any animal products unless you naturally hunt or you naturally trap, or because if you buy anything from the grocery store or from pretty much almost anyone, it's going to be raised in an intensive agriculture fashion. Excuse me.
Would you be okay with raising your own animals and then killing them in a humane way and eating them that way?
Personally,
this is a personal.
Personally, I wouldn't be. I feel that that's sort of setting a hierarchical value to saying that you're better than them, and so by having them as your own, you're already going into that relationship as I'm using them, whether or not.
Yeah, it's kind of like that. It's still taking away that natural instinct to be wild, right? So the whole idea of domesticating an animal for one's use, I find reprehensible to begin with. It's that's that basic robbing of another sentient creature's ability to be what that individual creature wants to be.
Right. Actually, so The group actually starts with three basic ideas. The first one being that wildness is something that is worth existing, and that we would want it to define our lives. The second is that wildness is being destroyed by industrial society, and that industrial society will continue destroying wildness unless it ends by itself, like unless it destroys itself, or unless people take action to help destroy it in whatever way they can. And then the third is that means that those who love wildness and want to preserve it will do anything that they can to help end industrial society. So this basic idea doesn't. There's this tension between technology and wildness, but to view it as an absolute, where we can live in an absolutely wild state or an absolutely technological state, is not exactly the orientation that I'd want to go. And I feel like if we're talking about, and so I'm not necessarily against, say, agriculture, per se, I just want wildness to define our lives more than it is allowed in industrial society. And so there's the question, I guess, of values and practical application here. So I think that veganism is important because of the values that it inspires in a lot of people. People will become vegan. Why? Because they feel compassion for living beings that are not themselves. That connection with wild creatures is built. But at the same time, I don't know if I would personally put energy or want that I would personally put energy into trying to get other people to go vegan, because I feel like there might be more effective practical things to do. But so a big practical thing to do is to spread wild values, and to spread values that encourage wildness. So that's why I don't dismiss veganism, and why I think that it's important, and why I understand it. But at the same time, I'm also a big group of people that I work with are hunters, and they go out and they hunt their meat. And so there's this tension between, say, the hunt saboteurs and the activist community, and then the people who I work with, who I'm friends with, who are like they go hunt and they eat the food, and they don't hunt endangered species, but I don't know. I don't know if saying that they're wrong. I wouldn't want to go the way of saying that they're wrong for eating the animals that they hunt, because they have a connection with the wild as well. It's just different.
Yeah, no, for sure. And at least for me, I'm definitely not speaking for every other vegan or animal rights activist out there. But for myself, someone who does do, they hunt their own food, and they actually, use those, every part, not necessarily every part, but they use the animal for their own sustenance and their family sustenance. I do believe that's different than somebody who just goes to a grocery store and doesn't understand the connection, right? But at the same time, I look at it and say, I'm all for survival. I'm going to do what I need to do to survive, but I'm also for not doing things unnecessarily. So if I don't have to go and hunt, then that just makes it something that I want to do, right? So I feel like if I don't have to eat an animal and kill it, the aspect of going out and killing it in of itself is me being selfish and portraying myself over another living creature and saying my selfishness because I want to experience this is greater than your life because I don't have to, because I have other means to sustenance.
Right, but the only reason why you don't have to is because industrial society exists, right?
That would depend on, how, like you said, you want to talk about regression, but if you go back for the most part, it depends how you want to look at it. Humans were more gatherers than hunters to begin with. Not saying that hunting didn't happen, but it wasn't necessarily the forte. It wasn't always the main sustenance of life. Do you know what I mean?
Right. Right.
So right now, in this current industrialized society, even hunting now is still based on industrialization, because they're using technology and industrialization, like, weapons, bullets, bows and arrows. Those were all produced because of the industrialized society. So if you want to say, you want to get rid of that and go hunting, and then go back to, hunting with, what you naturally have, which would be your fingernails, I guess.
Your hands.
Yeah, I think that if you want to say, that's going back, then I'd say, yeah, that would be going back and is more in tune with, a wild intrinsic self.
So we actually also have this idea that industrial society can't last forever, and that it will eventually collapses, and seems to have been in the process of collapse for at least since the mid 1900s, when there were lots of crises that have been actually staved off for a couple decades because of innovations. A big one, for example, is the Green Revolution, which allowed agriculture to continue for quite a while. But unless advances in biotechnology are successful, which they could be, and it would probably extend industrial society for a few more decades or longer, oil's running out, and we may eventually begin this process of catabolic collapse. And if there's a collapse, and it wouldn't be fast, it would probably be in a historical, from the historical perspective, it would be fast. But from the people experiencing it, it wouldn't be fast. It would be more like the decline of Rome. If this is happening, if this slow decline is happening, then people don't know how to identify wild plants. People would know how to scavenge, and people would know how to hunt. And so I feel like the ethical problems that present themselves in the circumstance of in our current circumstance are a lot like, say, the population problem. Which with the population problem, for example, there is overpopulation, but you can't attack that head on. For obvious reasons, and also there's a study that recently came out that talked about even if there was a drastic decline in population, it wouldn't really do much to our environmental to help our environmental health. So the point is that there are quite a few issues with this technological society that can't really be attacked head on. So it's important to recognize these issues to encourage an understanding of the situation. But and personal choices are totally welcome. But as far as strategy goes, I think I'm more of the perspective that the practical things I want to encourage people to do are causing disruption to technology itself, not necessarily individual acts of violence against technological infrastructure, more like collective disruption, and oh crap, what was I going to say? That doesn't mean that I'm discouraging people from other actions or from other choices. But the things that I would want to encourage with the group like Freedom Club are like spreading wild values and really pointing the practical action towards making technology the target.
Can I? This is one of my things that I get kind of confused on, and I want to get both your input on this. When you say technology, what does that actually mean?
So technology is more than infrastructure. So, for example, a computer would be more accurately called a technological artifact or a machine. because technology is actually the system that created this computer. It's the infrastructure that goes into it. It's the organizations that go into it. It's the social values that go into it, because this computer that I'm talking through right now is inseparable from the idea that humans are separate from nature. It's inseparable from this myth of the silence of animals or the myth of progress. It's also inseparable from this vast organizational structure that makes transport possible, that makes the control and domination of humans and wild things possible. So technology is a system, like capitalism is a system, and the computer is an artifact, like a commodity is to the capitalist system.
Yeah, I see technology or the technological system as the step after the industrial society. So we're in a technological society. We've had the foundation of industry, and now we're progressing towards something else, whether that is robotic humans or, nothing human at all. Yeah.
So do you believe that this technology, when you say technology is a system, do you believe that it can operate separate from capitalism, or do you think it's intrinsic on capitalism, like it relies on capitalism to exist?
Well, industry existed in a communist country, so I don't think it existed in communist countries. I think that industry can exist without capitalism as of right now. But historically, it's obvious that the two are tied very, very closely together. And depending on who you ask, like my friend Jesus in Spain, he believes that capitalism is the most efficient way to organize a late industrial society, but that given the circumstances, a technological society would use another economic system if that happened to be more efficient. For example, if we didn't have the vast amount of resources that we have now, we would probably leave democracy and capitalism and go to a more totalitarian state so that they can manage the resources better. But the base there is the technological infrastructure, the resources that are available, and that can so the capitalist system really depends on what's available. What the technological infrastructure in a specific historical circumstance or geographic one.
So when you talk about moving away from this technological system, does that mean, like, I still get confused on exactly what that means. Does that mean the complete domesticating anything? So would that be, weaving cotton? Would that be considered technology? Do you know what I mean? Like, I get really confused on and I hate to play because you can always find fault in any system by, trying to bring it down. But since that seems to be the point of it, I kind of have a hard time wrapping my mind around it.
David Watson, again, one of the early thinkers who developed primitivist theory in Fifth Estate, talked about the difference between technique, technics, and technology. And technology is a system, but technics would be, say, weaving cotton, depending on what the machine was produced by. Technics would be like the irrigation system that some localized communities have used. And that would be technics. Technics usually doesn't. There's no usually a reversion in technics, but in technology there can be a reversion. So the aqueducts that were used with Rome, which was a technological society, or the pyramids that were built in Egypt, which was a technological society, whenever those civilizations collapsed, the technology was so intertwined in that system and so complex and dependent on the organizational systems that whenever the civilization collapsed, the technology collapsed with it and went away. Technics, on the other hand, can be shared in a lot of circumstances, but also maintains a bit of local flavor. And technique is just, say, technique can totally be shared. It's never culturally bound. So you can technique would be like the way that you make an arrowhead or something like this.
So are tools like falling into that category?
Yeah. Yes. So, in other words, technology. The question of what level of technology is maybe a valid question, but maybe the wrong way to go about the issue, because what value is desirable is very different from what value is achievable. And so right now, I think it's possible to end the globalized industrial system. What would result after that is unknown. But the point is or whether you can even revert or attack those things. Like, you can't stop people from practicing agriculture. So the question of whether or not agriculture is desirable isn't the most important question to me. What's important is that can industry be stopped? Because industry is what is eradicating wildness worldwide and threatens to destroy it completely. Agriculture doesn't threaten to do that worldwide.
Yeah, and like when you say industry like that, to me, in my mind, that's intrinsic with capitalism. Do you know what I mean? Like, I think it's the capitalism that I think is doing that. Maybe I'm just splitting hairs here. I don't know.
That's where I'm at. That's how I feel.
Yeah.
Atticus, I don't know if you've given any thought to this.
Well, I kind of agree with what you guys are saying, that industry inherently brings up this idea of capitalism, and at least at this point, you can't really weave capitalism out of the technological system, and you definitely can't weave it out of industry. And I know that there have been past situations where technology has thrived in capitalist society, but I mean, it's our biggest threat right now, capitalism and technology together. Yeah.
But if we attack capitalism head on, this can be subsumed by the technological system because it can exist without. We've seen it already. It can exist even in communist countries. So the goal then, by consequence of being against industry, of course I'm against capitalism, but I'm not against capitalism per se. I'm against industry, and as a result, I'm against capitalism.
Yeah. The goal is not to specifically outline capitalism, but to take down industry.
That's interesting to me, because most people I talk to that would align themselves with primitivism attack it from the point of capitalism as the mainstay.
Mm-hmm. This is a problem, I think, with primitivist thought right now. This is actually a big thing. We're working on a book right now with some pretty good thinkers called Technique, and it will be published after our essay Notes. We don't know the title yet. It might be Notes Toward a New Primitivism. It might be Beyond Anti-Capitalism, something like this. This essay will scaffold some of these ideas. Okay. And then we want to come up with a book called Technique, and it'll explain I think it will be we want it to be to the ecology movement what Das Kapital was to communism, except a lot less theoretical and written by 18 to 22-year-olds. So, so we want to investigate, we want to explain how technology is a system, explain the contradictions that are inherent in it, and explain what we can do about it. And that really, I think, will be hopefully the impact that we make. It will be through that essay and through that book.
I gotta be fair that I've never really given serious thought to what people consider primitivism since late 90s. With my kind of like with the fallout with Suzanne, I kind of just have always pushed it aside, where I feel like my internal thought process and my how I internally analyze everything is very similar in that idea, but I can't get around the idea. Like we talked to somebody recently where they said, using a shovel is a form of domestication, or a spoon, and I'm like, yeah, I can't get around that. You're kind of crazy to me. You know what I mean? And so like I've never really given much thought to it, because after that point, because if you're going to tell me I can't use a spoon, I'm going to tell you fuck off.
Right. Exactly. This is why, whether or not it's domestic, this is why the absolutes are not important. I think that there are absolute tensions that we can create. Like, we can create these theoretical conceptions of technology as the absolute tension pushing one way, and wildness as the absolute tension pushing the other way. And I think we can accept it as a general goal to say that we want wildness to define our lives and be more present. And we can also say that industry is making that an impossible thing. Whereas, say, agriculture doesn't. So the goal here is not to make it an absolutely wild circumstance, because this sounds boring anyway. Because if there is this primitive Garden of Eden or whatever, I wouldn't really want to be a part of it. I wouldn't want to be in a place where there isn't any struggle. We kind of have a reference point for this, for example, with the Greek gods who have attained immortality and live in this great, perfect world without any suffering or whatever. And some of the gods actually choose to leave that to go live as mortals because there's adventure and there's blood and there's like a hard reality. And so these tensions will always be here. The goal here is not to enter into some primitivist heaven. The goal here is just to say, look, we want wildness to define our lives. Wildness is not something that can continue existing if industry exists. So industry has to end in order for wildness to define our lives again. In order for us to even have a choice to live in more wild circumstances, we have to end industry. So the question that we're trying to investigate and that we don't really have an answer for is to what extent can we aid the fall of the industrial system? And we have some thoughts about this, but it's not completely, we don't know completely. We're having reading groups to talk about it.
So, yeah, that doesn't necessarily mean that this idea is going to be, like, it's not going to happen right now. That doesn't necessarily mean that's what people want right now. But, like, our Freedom Club journal, the FC journal, is there as a way to inspire and sort of incite these emotions in other people. We want to promote these ideas so that eventually they'll bloom and other people will feel the way that we do.
I do feel that these are the exact type of discussions that don't happen enough, that I wish would happen more, that I wish I, had them more. And then I lost my train of thought. I definitely like struggle with it personally. I think that, I don't know, I'm a programmer, for a living, so
yeah,
I use technology all the time. So it's definitely something I struggle with. But I do see like the benefit of not having technology.
Well, I mean, I love computers. I love them, but I don't think they're worth it. The consequences of having a computer are just too much, and they're hidden from me a lot of the time. And also, again, me being against technology is not being against a computer. It's me being against the whole system that makes that computer possible. Because whenever I talk about a computer, I'm really not just talking about this thing in front of me. I'm talking about the internet and the server farms that destroy ecosystems. And I'm talking about this whole large system. So again, it's not about like living in a world without a computer, because this computer is still going to be here even after the collapse of that perfect and delicate system. Once it falls, once industrial civilization starts its decline, this computer will still be here, and I'm sure it has a lot of potentials. This like heap of metal has a lot of potential outside of the way that we're using it right now. But I can definitely accept that as far as the hard reality goes that the system that produces this computer is just not worth it. Unfortunately, we'll have to wait unfortunately, I'll have to wait for some other type of system to come along.
So when you say some sort of other system, are you open to the idea that new technology could make it sustainable and worth it?
I think I agree with Heidegger in that there's always the potential for something. Like, we can't dismiss potentialities. Whether or not it would be calling it technology would be kind of like saying a new kind of capitalism. So it doesn't really make that much sense, but maybe a different, something else that can do something similar to a computer. A friend of mine once put it this way. She's like, I don't know that we can't go to space on a rock. And of course, that's ludicrous. There are technical limitations that a rock can't just blast from the Earth and take you to space. But what she's saying there is that there's potential for things outside in this world that we can't even conceive of right now. And of course, that's there. And so the goal here is not to shut down potential, but just to accept that what we have right now, as far as we know, right now, it has to change. And so the knowledge that we do have is that industrial society has to end in order for wildness to thrive in a dignified and living manner. What that means for other systems is unknown until we get there.
If you guys don't mind, let me take this for a whole new little turn here. What are both of your origins? Like, what brought you guys to this ideology and to activism in general?
Do you want me to go? Do you want to go?
Go ahead, Atticus.
Okay. Well, this is a very new thing for me. I guess I could say literature brought me to this point. I read 2 books that were really significant: On the Road by Jack Kerouac and then Into the Wild, both of which have this sense of like loss and this need to find. And On the Road, the main character, he travels across the United States and he tries to find himself, and on the way he gets, interrupted by other things which give him sadness. And, his happiest moments are when he's under the stars by himself. And I guess that's the sort of moment of wildness that I took from that. And Into the Wild, it's the book about Alex McCandless, and he went out into the wild and he died. And people were very confused by why he would want to escape from society. But I found myself really understanding his perspective. And I don't know. So that just kind of just put me in the direction of more radical ideas about society. I grew up a liberal. I grew up a Democrat. My parents are Democrats, like extreme liberals. So I've always identified myself as a liberal, but I've never felt that way. And then I guess recently, I got into the radical political groups in schools, and I met John, and we talked a lot, and he started making sense, and we sort of started agreeing with this, and he was starting Freedom Club, and, I wanted to join because I agreed with what he was saying, so. Yeah.
Let's see. My development probably started when I was a small kid and was going to the libraries all the time and read a lot of books. I was raised as a chandelier shaking Bible bashing Christian, so I would read a lot of religious books in the library. But it was near the philosophy section, so I read a lot of philosophy as well. I read Sartre. I don't know maybe that's how you pronounce his name. I ended up reading Marx as well. I don't know. I read a lot about the existentialists and all this sort of thing. It's very interesting. A lot of these books didn't really change my thought a lot, but I find them coming up more and more often nowadays. Mm-hmm. So I would say that they probably definitely affected my thought then. They didn't lead to any revolutionary thoughts or whatever, but so I went a few years. My mother died, and so I didn't have to be a fundamentalist Christian anymore. And so at 14, I declared myself an atheist and started investigating all sorts of stuff. And eventually went away from the atheism a little bit, became a little bit more spiritual or whatever. And in this quest of trying to find myself in between that process of becoming atheism and losing my entire worldview and trying to find other worldviews, I came across some radical politics. And so I was having some trouble with my family. I went from house to house, a few different families, and I was in a very rural town in North Carolina whenever Occupy happened. And at the time, I was really angry at the world around me. I didn't want it to exist the way that it existed. I didn't quite know what was wrong with it, though. And so Occupy was thrilling to me because Occupy didn't know what it wanted about the world either. So I was like, oh, all right. Well, and so I tried to get involved in the way that I could as a person in a rural town. I don't know, like contacted people over the internet and read the New Inquiry magazine and all of this sort of thing. And then eventually, with the last family that I lived with, my grandmother's house, I was living in my grandmother's house. I realized that I was probably going to leave her house and be homeless. So I tried to figure out what I was going to do. So I was going to go to No More Deaths, which is a project in Arizona. Yeah, and there are a few anarchists who help out there, or so I heard from somebody who had been part of it. And so I was like, all right, well, I'll go learn more about this anarchism thing. And I ended up not going because my boyfriend at the time got accepted into UNC. So I went with him to UNC Chapel Hill because there were lots of anarchists there as well, causing lots of trouble. So I read it on the news, and I was like, all right, so I can learn more about it here. I ended up being homeless there for a year, but the anarchists showed me like abandoned buildings to sleep in, where to get free food. I kind of accepted the label of anarchist. And then, I don't know, it's been about almost 2 years now, and I'm moving away from the label anarchist. I don't know if it really explains my politics completely, but I'll always be thankful and friends with the people who have helped me get through that time. And they also introduced me to the writings of Ted Kaczynski. And so I read Industrial Society and Its Future. And I was like, oh, this is exactly what I think, you know? So I didn't know what it was during Occupy that I didn't like about the world, but I'm reading Industrial Society and Its Future, and this makes sense. I can call it the technological society, the fact that everything's so ordered. And then I figured out it was the Unabomber, and he sent bombs to 16 people and killed 4 of them. And I was like, oh, what does that mean?
So I know how that feels.
You're right. And so I read the essay, Why the Future Doesn't Need Us, by Bill Joy, and he was somebody who very well could have received one of the bombs that the Unabomber was sending to people, but he said, oh, the Unabomber was right. And so I was like, okay, well, I can believe this. It's all right. Just because what he did wasn't necessarily an okay thing to do, it doesn't mean that his ideas are not acceptable. Lots of people, or article after article, proved this, where people were like, yeah, the Unabomber was right. And so I just started from that point to investigate more of this anti-technology strain of primitivism. And now I'm here today, starting Freedom Club and hoping that it goes well and that we can make our impact on this kind of line of thought.
It's interesting that you brought up Kaczynski, because I've read a little bit of Kaczynski, and every time I read him, it's like, okay, point A is good, point B is good, point C is good. Wait a second, how did you get to point X all of a sudden? Mm-hmm. Like, to me, there's always like huge jumps in there that don't make logical sense to me. But that's a whole other thing. So, Atticus, have you really done much into anarchism theory and thought?
No, I'm really new to all of this. This has legitimately been a couple months of me just getting into this. I guess the reason that I'm a spokesperson for Freedom Club is because I edit the journal, and it's something that I want to get into. I just, I need more time and I need more research, I guess. So.
There's amazing resources, but
yeah, absolutely. Do you have any recommendations for, anarchist thought or, primitivism?
I like a lot of the classic anarchist thought. A lot of newer anarchists kind of stay away from, like Jordan. He's like, fuck that. Mm-hmm. They're old.
Yeah. Sometimes I don't feel like older anarchists, they don't live in the same society we live in. So some of their concepts are, while they can be used in our current society, they don't completely apply to our current society.
Mm-hmm.
I agree with that assessment, except, I'm a huge fan of knowing your roots kind of a thing.
Yeah.
There's to me, this is kind of like a hidden gem that's online that I talk to a lot of people and they don't know about. It's called the Anarchy Archives. and it's hosted by a professor at Brown University.
Mm. Oh.
And it's just pretty much all the classic anarchist writings, all their old pamphlets, all free. There's even some newer ones in there. He has all the Creative Commons that like Chomsky has out and things like that. But it really focuses on a lot of the older ones. My favorite introduction to anarchism is Bakunin's Capitalist System. It's a short pamphlet. I absolutely love it.
David Graeber also has a really awesome introduction to anarchism.
Yeah, and Graeber's a modern, I don't know if you're familiar with David Graeber at all. He's a modern anarchist. Where university is he at now?
I can't remember.
He got fired from Stanford, I believe. And I could be wrong. He got fired from an Ivy League university for helping students organize, basically, is what it came down to. But I think he's at Cambridge now. Cambridge or Oxford. Anyways, he's an archaeologist, anarchist archaeologist, funny enough. So yeah, I definitely recommend those.
Excellent.
But John, you were also saying you're kind of getting away from that. Like, I myself have gone through waves of ups and downs, but like, what makes you feel like you're getting away from it?
Cool. I can answer that in just a second, but I have a funny story about the Anarchy Archives thing. So I found the website, and it was if I'm thinking that this is the correct website, it looks really like an old website.
Yeah, like mid-90s website.
Right. Yeah. And so it's like, funny. This thing hasn't been updated in ages. So I emailed the I tried to find the email, and I emailed the webmaster, and I was like, if you're not updating this page or whatever, like, I can help you redesign it or like take over or something like this. And he replied so grumpily. He seemed so angry that I on the appearance of the website. He's like, it's active still. So that's kind of how I came across the Anarchy Archives.
It is a horribly designed website. You're correct. Like, it's horrible. It's ridiculous to navigate. It's kind of hard to find like all the works, but there's amazing resources there.
Yeah, well,
that's funny.
So yeah, let's see, moving away from anarchism. So I find a lot of anarchism to be kind of just a more radical form of left progressivism, and I'm not a big fan of that. So
can you define that more for me? Like, what you mean by that?
Yeah, so there's this narrative that we've been making a lot of progress in the social justice area. So there's like the civil rights movement after the end of slavery, after whatever, and that, we can keep fighting and eventually, I don't know, and eventually we just like, there's a continual struggle to make things better. And I don't really agree with that too much. And that's not to say that people who are the main and influential thinkers in anarchism are that way. But that doesn't matter much whenever the majority of the other people who call themselves anarchists believe that. It really defines the character of anarchism, because those are the people who interact with, those are the people who are talking to people who aren't anarchists and who are like, well, what is anarchism? So that's one strain that I'm not really happy with. There's another strain of anarchism that I think, so I'm not actually sure what insurrectionary anarchism is, but it seems as though it's a strain that can be defined as what I would call opportunism. And I think that they just jump on every social movement that they can get and try to push the ideas. And a good example of this is this pamphlet called Nomos of the Earth, which came out during the climate change march stuff. And the people who released it weren't really environmentalists that much, but they kind of just used the climate change march for a chance to push anarchist ideas, which I wasn't really happy with, although the pamphlet was really well designed. So I don't know. There's like a few different strands of anarchism that I'm not super happy with. They're kind of the dominant strands. And so it's kind of just a lost label for me. It's a label that I don't think asks the right questions. Also, yeah, there's another thing. There's a huge thing. Whenever I tell people I'm an anarchist, they want to talk about the government, and they want to talk about social justice things primarily. And these things are important to recognize because those are important elements that kind of intersect and create the situation that we're in right now. But the things I want to talk about are not the conversations that are inspired by that word anarchism. They are inspired by that word primitivism. They are inspired by the word Luddite. So I kind of use those labels more.
That's the first point you made about the being close to, like, to progressiveness and the whole social justice. That's interesting to me because I can see, like, progressive liberals being that way, but I don't think I've ever talked to an anarchist that's like, yay, civil rights is great, because that's just horseshit. Like, it's like a Band-Aid. It's not really fixing the problem, right? I would say that anarchism, like, received its height in the 30s, and ever since then it's been on a decline. I don't think there's been any progression since the mid 30s, really. That's just personal. Yeah.
What I mean by that is more like anarchists get involved in things where they I don't know what their intention is really, because I haven't really investigated the history that in depth yet, but the consequences that they end up being co-opted by the progressives, and this happens over and over again. So what they're really doing, what they intend to do is whatever, but what they're actually doing is they're giving heat. They're giving a lot of strength to the progressive cause, and this can be avoided very simply. It's been talked about again and again and again about, like, figuring out. I just feel like there's enough material there for people to investigate, like, how to avoid this, and I don't think it's actually being done.
It's funny to me because that is the same critique I feel I have with communists.
Yeah.
Like honestly.
Yeah.
Like, yeah. Yeah.
I feel like I'm constantly butting heads with the progressive left. I don't feel that I'm ever.
Oh yeah, I don't feel like I'm ever on the same page. No.
That's good.
Then again, yeah, I'm also not on the same page with the right, so that's why I'm an anarchist.
Yeah, I mean, I like the term anarchist because it's the only thing that I have found that even remotely starts to describe the way I feel about, the idea of hierarchy and the idea of what actual freedom means. So.
Atticus, you were telling me a little bit about you had some skeptical feelings about anarchism as a word, as a label that you would use. Maybe you have some good thoughts on this.
Just that it elicits certain images and certain ideas, and it has a lot of implications that aren't necessarily the most productive. It's heavy, people hear that word and they automatically assume certain things, and it, to me, kind of stifles production, depending on, I guess, what your goal is. But I feel like sometimes it's better to just not have the label at all so that you can get things done. Like, people aren't going to look at you if they don't hear that word. If they hear that word, you're going to be watched,
That's kind of funny because that's one of the reasons I came back to the term, was that I like the idea that it elicited the complete wrong ideas of what it is, because what that does is you can instantly then correct that, and then it kind of, maybe this is just my pipe dream, but it makes them think, well, if I'm completely wrong about this, what the fuck else am I wrong about? Like, what else have I been taught that is completely not accurate?
The problem is they're actually right about a lot of these things. So they talk about, so for example, there's this idea of anarchists as just like wanting to always smash things up. And while that's not the core of anarchism, it's certainly the type that's the public face of anarchism in a lot of areas where there's super like insurrecto anarchist groups where people only hear about anarchists whenever they smash cop cars or whenever they go to a demonstration, and not that this is a bad tactic, but that it's just all the time that people are going to be like, well, the anarchists really just want to smash things up, and they want to use large crowds in order to be able to do that, and that's true in a lot of areas. That's used over and over again, and I think that's a tendency that's actually getting out of control, which of course is the idea, to make it out of control or whatever. But I think that what happens there is that what you achieve is, yeah, sure, there's an out of control situation and you can smash lots of things up, but the thing that actually gets you through large disruptive situations, the relationships that you build are actually not being built because people are like, well, they don't want to actually interact with us. They're just masked people who are scary. And this is might just be a problem that people have to overcome, but it's one that is such a problem right now and seems insurmountable to me that it doesn't seem helpful to use the label.
Well, I mean, this is, I would say it's very similar to the problem that happened in the late 90s, like going around, like WTO protests in like Seattle, and like the aftermath of that. And I don't know, you guys were probably, you said you guys were like 18, 20, so you guys were probably a little young for that. But I was actually in Seattle for that. And there was a lot of those exact same discussions. And for me, coming out of it is like, you're right, that does lead to people saying they only want to mash things up, but it leads to greater discussions in the long run because one, yes, I do support them smashing the cop cars, fuck the police. And then I also, completely support, helping your neighbor out at the same time and trying to show that dichotomy of like what that really means. And I think it opens up more discussions about why that cop car is being smashed, why that authority is being challenged, why that hierarchical structure, why the violence of the state needs to be challenged on every single level. And that, sometimes pacifism, is probably the most violent way to go, and that the only way to really stop violence can be violence in of itself.
Atticus, do you have any thoughts about this?
I was just actually going to ask, how do you guys feel about, and like we were talking about earlier, the relationships between anarchists and the other general public and maybe other activist groups? How do you create these relationships? Because like you said earlier, it creates a dialogue, but only certain people are going to listen to that dialogue. Mm-hmm. There are going to be people that see, the anarchist, persona made by the media, and they're going to be like, oh no, these techniques don't work with us. Even though you're battling the same thing, how do you create a community like that? How do you create an overarching community for everybody?
I pointed to Jordan. He can take that one.
If that's possible. I mean, it's okay if it's not, but
I don't think that anarchists are always in black blocs smashing things up. Anarchists are participating in general assemblies and
not all
rallies.
black blocs are anarchists.
Yeah,
and that needs to be clear.
Yeah, and obviously that's true as well. Mm-hmm. However, I think that outside of being in black bloc, they're still building these relationships and they're still furthering their ideas as well as working together with the other people.
I think a great look at this is the aftermath of Hurricane Katrina. Like the best organization on the ground, feeding people, housing people, making sure people were
food,
safe,
not bombs,
was anarchist organizations. And so much so the state actually came in trying to shut down these organizations from feeding people. And so it can definitely be done, but I think the way that anarchists need to do it is it needs to not be going in there and being the savior. It's going into communities and saying, what do you as a community need? We're here to support you, not tell you how to be. Mm-hmm. And I think that's like a key tenet of what anarchism, like I think a lot of other ideologies come in and say, well, our ideology dictates it has to be this way. But I think the good thing about a lot of anarchist ideology is that it's really more flexible in a lot of ways because it's really about the end goal. It's about, doing what needs to be done to achieve the end goal and not, succumbing to the hierarchy.
Right. Sense. I just want to be clear that I've been behind some of this earlier whenever I thought that I was really gonna operate as an anarchist, like that was going to be my identity, where there was there was a protest in Durham, NC, and some anarchists went and smashed the windows in the police station, and then there was this big rumor about this big basically falsehood that was spread by some of the liberal activists that anarchists just want to come in Durham, smash shit up, and then run away, and then leave the crowd to fend for themselves. But anarchists were also really involved in helping pay for the bail for the kids that were arrested then, and helped run events for the skaters. And they were really. So I'm not saying that that's what anarchists do in all situations where they just smash things up and then that's it. And I'm just saying that this is certainly the image that is portrayed, and in many cases it is true in local areas, and that for the purposes of Freedom Club, where we want to investigate these new ideas and want them to kind of take hold, the people that we want to talk to are being alienated by anarchism. And so it just doesn't seem like a good idea to put ourselves underneath that banner.
You know, I do agree that my biggest falling out with anarchism mainly has to do with the crime think, where it is all about smashing shit. It's not about building.
Newer crime think's not as
It's evolved a little bit. I'll give him that. But like we were talking to Scott Crow earlier, who was one of the key organizers in the aftermath of Hurricane Katrina. And I really do believe if we want to do anything positive, we have to organize our communities. And as anarchists, I do believe we are better suited than most to do that.
Why do you say that?
Like I said before, with going in there with the open mind. Like,
oh, right, yeah.
If you go into any situation and try to dictate, the first thing that happens to me, I'll walk into something, and if I say, "Oh, I'm this is what needs to be happen," I'm a white middle class male exerting my privilege, right? Mm-hmm. So that's obviously not going to work in most situations. You know, I think the best thing that anarchists can do, and I think they do a lot, is like you were saying. They get into the background of the organizing. They're the ones, helping to organize, the bell releases. They're the ones that are organizing the kitchens. They're the ones that are organizing. The entire Occupy movement was an anarchist movement when you really look at the roots of it. What kept it going was anarchists. What the entire organizational structures were anarchists, and so that in of itself, I think, can show you the heights of what anarchist organizing can achieve.
Right, and we actually are inspired very much by. I think I can, from my conversations with Atticus. Maybe you feel this way too. Just correct me if I'm wrong. But I think that there are lots of good ideas in anarchism that are inspiring, and that I have at least adopted for my own approach to this group, Freedom Club. But anarchism taken as a whole inspires questions and ideologies and a line of thinking, like a path of thinking that I just don't think – I think it diverges from where I want to go at some point. And so the label just doesn't seem super helpful to use. But I have to recognize that I live in a town where the reason why I'm able to get food, the reason why I was able to get food consistently was because anarchists helped me out. The people who mentor me are older anarchists. The ideas that inspire me often come from anarchism. So it's not that I'm saying that anarchism is wrong or bad, or that I don't want anything to do with it, but just that I think that there's enough difference for me to say that it's not the label that I want to go by.
So if you had to label yourself, what would you choose?
I like the idea of primitivist without the anarcho, or the label Luddite.
Can you really explain to me more what Luddite? Because to me, when I hear the term Luddite, I think religion. I think religious zealot. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Wow. You think what zealot?
Like religious zealot. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Why do you think religious?
That's what I get.
Because I'm ignorant. Yeah. I don't know. Like, honestly.
Yeah.
Atticus, you were going to say something?
Oh, I was just surprised that you thought of like religion came to your mind. That's all.
Yeah. That's honestly like the first thing that comes to my mind when I hear the term Luddite. But I mean, I do know, doesn't the term Luddite just means like a rejection of technology?
Well, that's what it means now. Historically, The Luddites were, in the 1800s, they were stocking frame. They were workers, textile mill workers, who were mad that machines were taking their jobs and their livelihood, and thought that that the machines and industrialization was eventually going to destroy their way of life, and they were right. And this was during the Industrial Revolution, whenever Marxism was coming along, and communism was saying, look, here's an alternative to the problems of industrialism. Or you had the utopian socialists, and then you had the capitalists, and then you had lots of these different things. But the only reaction to the Industrial Revolution that outright rejected it was the Luddites, and they smashed the machinery, and they started food riots, and eventually they tried to start an insurgency, but were destroyed. because they were courted by the workers were courted by unions. So the Luddites I think there are two important aspects about the Luddites, and the reason why I like bringing in that term, actually three. So the first one is that they were the only response that just rejected industrialism outright. The second is that they really are part of this long tradition of people questioning whether or not a new technological advance outweighs the good of those new technological advances outweighs the bad, or vice versa. And then three, it's been used in modern times for like Earth First, or for anybody who just has a critical attitude toward technology. And I like the idea of taking an epithet or like an insult and turning it on its head, like queer, or like the word Christian did in the 1st century AD. So yeah, this is why I like the word Luddite.
That's interesting about turning the word upside down. Interestingly enough, capitalism was originally a bad term to describe what it was. It was used as a negative sense. People embrace it because they're stupid. But I mean, I got to give you both props, because you're making me want to re-examine something that I've kind of brushed off a long time ago. And re-examine new ideas of thought that I haven't examined before. So, thank you for that, because honestly, I love challenging myself on everything.
Cool. Well, I hope you keep up with the project. Where our online magazine, FC Journal, is at thejournal.link. And feel free to pay attention to the submissions. We've got submissions from an author who was published in the New York Times, a blog Opinionator, a friend of Arnie Ness's. I think that's how you pronounce his last name. All of these people or in the coming weeks, we're going to be publishing submissions from them. And there's really going to be a conversation going on about these ideas and this new orientation for primitivism that we want to propose.
Well, both of you, how can people follow your work and get in contact with you if they choose?
You can go ahead if you want.
No, go ahead.
I was just going to say, go to the FC Journal blog, and you can also find us at our website. You can just Google UNC FC, UNC Freedom Club, and our email is all on there.
Yeah, we have our email is uncfc@riseup.net, and our website is uncfc.org, and our Facebook is facebook.com/UNC Freedom Club.
That's a lot of technology.
It is.
Anyway, I had to be the smart ass. So, but for reals, I've thoroughly enjoyed this. Thank you guys a lot. We end every episode saying "fuck, shit, damn." Would both of you mind saying that?
Fuck, shit, damn.
Fuck, shit, damn.
Awesome. Thank you guys very much.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Okay.
Have a good one.
You too. See ya.
Bye.
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 This week you heard Fisticuffs at Dawn by Little People.
Right now you're listening to
Tale of a Scorched Earth by Obscurus Advocam.
This is the gift-giving season, because I don't know why. I mean, I think the furthest it goes back is because of the god Saturn.
Yeah.
But anyways, this is the gift-giving season. And if you want to give us a gift and you don't want to spend any money, because really, who the fuck wants to spend money? We need more ratings and reviews on iTunes.
Yeah, it really helps us out. It helps boost our search ranking up so that more people can find us. And it's just a nice thing to do.
And it doesn't cost you anything. And you can honestly be honest on your review.
Only 0.0001% of the people that listen have rated and reviewed us. So if you haven't gone and done that, don't be a jerk.
Do it. And if you have done it, still someone else's device, phone, computer, and go do it. Doesn't cost them anything, doesn't cost you anything, and it just helps us out. And it's like giving us an internet hug.
And if you do have somebody else's device, you might as well subscribe them while you're at it.
Help each other out, man. That's what we're all about here.
If you do feel like spending money on a gift for us, you can always go to our wish list and check out the things that we have added up for the collective and the podcast.
We do also do social things. We're kind of social.
So, if you're not friends with us, go to whichsidepodcast.com, click on the social tab, be our friends. We post a lot of stuff on there that we don't talk about on the show. So be our friends, like us. Well, I will catch you guys all in 2015. Fuck shit damn. Fuck shit damn.
We need a social media intern to join our team. If interested in becoming activist famous or a level 5 vegan, hit us up on social media. Which Side Podcast is hosted and produced by Jordan Halliday and Jeremy Parkin of the Which Side Media Collective, with web design by Jordan Halliday and sound design by Jeremy Parkin. Booking by Mari Halliday. Theme music by Commandantes. Go to whichsidecollective.org to check out the other shows in the collective. As always, fuck shit damn.